Hello and welcome to Lore Cattle Ranch. My name is GiBi, and those who have been following my channel for the last 6 years should remember that many of my early videos revolved around the question of who is the Captain. The Captain appeared to be an enigmatic figure in the background of many of Chris's videos, either speaking to or about Chris. People on the outside feared he would become a new ideas guy type figure and lead Chris's life in a direction that was unbecoming of the internet's favorite lolcow, at least until the events of the Barb incident. Despite having little information about him, many of my early videos were speculating about what he might want. The Captain himself was a Kiwi Farms user who many people on that site were well aware of. He had a neutral to positive reputation, and nobody was truly scared that he would do anything harmful to Chris. It was merely the idea of someone coming in and controlling Chris's life so close to the end of the Idea Guy saga that had people concerned. A few days ago, a Quickie user posted an essay about their relationship with the Captain over the last half-decade. Since the Captain hasn't been relevant in many years, I figured this should act as a capstone to my discussions of him. A retrospective from the perspective of somebody who knew him, with his story finally told in hindsight. Let's begin. This essay was published October 11th, 2025 on the Quickie. I've been thinking about writing this for a while, to fill in some small gaps in public info. This is mostly based on my chats with the Captain many years ago. The Captain and I started chatting in May 2018. He said that his in with Chris stemmed from knowing both Megan and Anna personally. The Captain was able to influence Chris away from the Idea Guys, not just because he had bought the amethyst ring and played along with Chris's fantasy, but also because Anna had vouched for him months before the Idea Guys saga even began. According to the Captain, buying the ring alone probably wouldn't have gotten Chris to trust him, but that and Anna's vouching was what got him there. Anna also found out that Chris was buying gift cards for what turned out to be the Idea Guys, so she contacted the Captain and asked if he could help intervene, which he successfully did. The group, which observers later dubbed the Guard Dogs, formed. Anna and Love You Long Time were both involved with it. Anna helped, but there was a dispute over her wanting time to focus on her college finals before trying to report the Idea Guys to authorities. Captain was unwilling to wait. So she left the group after Captain and Marvin voted to bring Noel on board, as she didn't trust Noel. Editorializing GiBi here. For anyone who doesn't remember this particular chapter of Christory, after the Idea Guys lost influence, some people on the Kiwi Farms decided that it was best for Chris to be under the influence of people who wanted what was best for him, as opposed to the Idea Guys who were extorting money out of him. This group was called the Guard Dogs, and as the article states, Marvin, a Kiwi Farms user, the Captain, a Kiwi Farms user, and Noel, the owner and operator of the Kiwi Farms, were part of this group. This group would disband shortly after this, and that led the Watchmen to come and gain influence over Chris's life, until the Watchmen fell apart, and Bella and her little cronies, the Chess Club, were able to gain control of Chris around the time that he began sleeping with Barb. So there were these three groups of people who were sort of taking charge of Chris after the Idea Guys, and the Guard Dogs were the earliest version of this. The Captain was angry at Anna for leaving the group, and last he mentioned it, they were no longer speaking to each other over it. Love You Long Time had a role partially in common with the Captain, of social aspects, both talking to Chris and getting him to stay off his accounts while the Idea Guys were being removed. Chris thought well of the Captain, and asked him at least 3 times to be his manager, but the Captain told me he was strongly opposed to doing that, and that he just wanted to prevent harm to Chris. Chris kept asking the Captain's advice for common sense things, and would call him just to say hello. Editorial GiBi here. Another thing that I think it's glossed over with a lot of coverage of Chris is that he truly did befriend a lot of these people in these protector groups. With the Watchmen specifically, they would have movie nights with him. They would play games with him. He also had a local D&D group that he played with. Even some of the best commentary and the best research on Chris from people like the Gamer from Mars video essay and the book about Warhol and Chris Chan sort of omits that Chris did have real-life friends and also people over the internet that he was very friendly with. He had a lot of social connections. He wasn't this outcast on the fringes of society with no human interaction besides Barb. That's definitely a myth that's persisted just based on what people think a social recluse and a lolcow like Chris should be, but that's never actually been the case. I should also mention, just because things in real life are never simply divided into categories of time, that the Praetors did exist while the Watchmen were still quote-unquote in power, and it's now, in the modern day, the Praetors who sort of have quote-unquote control over Chris. So I guess the lineage would go Idea Guys, Guard Dogs, Watchmen, Bella/Praetor, and now Praetor. Chris has a habit of being generous toward people he trusts, and there was an incident where the captain had sent him a photo of his own amiibo collection, and then Chris decided on his own to start gathering more to add to Captain's collection in early May, despite Captain having told him at least 10 times beforehand not to buy him anything. Captain was annoyed by that, and said to me that if those arrived in the mail, they would be returned to sender. Chris tried asking the Captain for money at least once. On 18 July 2018, he asked Captain to loan him $200, but Captain replied with no. Chris apparently called Jack Z and asked for money. This is not to say that Captain was indifferent to Chris's financial issues. Back in early May, when it was uncertain whether Chris would be able to pay the mortgage due to having sent money to the Idea Guys, the Guard Dogs, including Captain, were contemplating arranging a fundraiser if Chris couldn't come up with the mortgage money by mid-month. Captain only considered it due to the circumstances of Chris being exploited by the Idea Guys. As it turned out, a fundraiser was unnecessary, since Chris managed to scrounge up money for the mortgage and even had enough left over to partake in a lease one, get one free phone deal. Editorializing again here. Is that even the correct word? I don't know. Jack Z was a very small enabler. I don't even remember this person. Apparently a YouTuber who would send Chris money trying to get him to appear on his channel to bolster his YouTube and lolcow reporting career. I always try to avoid sort of having strong opinions on people who I haven't studied thoroughly in the Chris Chan mythos. It's very easy to point to YouTubers or other people and say, oh, they're enabling Chris for their own money and views. But that becomes a very subjective challenge, so I don't really know anything about this Jack Z person, and I'm not going to pass judgment. On 9 May 2018, Chris met with Rocky Shoemaker. Rocky Shoemaker was someone that Chris knew in real life. It was an older woman in his community. I believe someone involved with his church who helped him in some real-life issues he was going through, and is definitely someone that the community has trusted as having, like, Chris's actual best interest, and someone in his real life, like an adult, a guiding figure, who sort of guided him. So she is a good person. She's someone that we approve of. On 9 May 2018, Chris met with Rocky Shoemaker, the Guard Dogs, Captain Marvin Knoll and Love You Long Time, had thought it would be good if he talked to her and then both go to the local police to report the Idea Guys. Knoll emailed a copy of his FBI report on the Idea Guys to Rocky, and the captain spoke with Rocky over the phone to explain in further detail and answer some questions she had. Captain told me she was very concerned over what had happened. He asked Chris to take a selfie with her and let him know how the meeting went. The meeting wound up delayed because Chris decided to stop at the post office first. According to the Guard Dogs I chatted with about what happened, Rocky wanted to take Chris to the Greene County Community Support Center, Region 10, and she thought the mental health staff there would help Chris file the complaint, which didn't really work out. The lady Chris used to talk to was on maternity leave at the time, and Chris didn't want to speak with anyone else. The dogs were frustrated because Rocky didn't take Chris to the sheriff's office to file a report the day of the meeting. The dogs thought that if Rocky's plans didn't include going there later, then Knoll would contact the police himself. He did so the following day over email. The dogs also got Barb's phone number and were considering contacting her to encourage Chris to go to the police, though I don't know if they resorted to that. On 15 May, Chris personally went to the police by himself and claimed it went fine, though the captain noted that Chris had been somewhat iffy with him over the past couple days. On 11 May, the Idea Guys attempted to get back into contact with Chris and resume some Stephen King roleplay, but Chris shut them down with his reply that he would consider doing it for $6,000. Halfway through May, the captain described himself and Love You Long Time as the gatekeepers to Chris. However, Captain wasn't really enjoying it, and indicated that he was thinking of possibly backing off after the reporting of the Idea Guys was resolved. The following month, Knoll had taken the lead within the Guard Dogs group, though the captain remained in contact with Chris. On 25 December 2018, Chris's Twitter account posted a message from Magichan, which doxed Lucas. Lucas blamed the captain for it, but that was inaccurate. It had actually been Marvin who did that. My understanding is that the captain only helped gather info on Lucas and friends behind the scenes. Editorial note, so Lucas was a member of a group of young people that the community has a name for that I will not say, as it includes a slur for trans people. This is the young group of trans people who met up with Chris. Sometimes Chris went to their house and they smoked weed together, and would sort of help along Chris's delusions. There's a very infamous video of Chris making out with one of his fictional spouses in front of them and them encouraging it. I might play that right now.
She's very pretty. Thank you.
Lucas and these other people have long since left the Chris sphere, and so I don't necessarily want to dwell on their identities too long, but these people at the time were some of the people who were able to interact with Chris in person, whereas the guard dogs were really only interacting with Chris over the internet. So I can definitely see why they were worried about Chris having enablers in person, while they were only able to, quote-unquote, protect Chris or manipulate Chris over the internet. So if Chris just didn't respond for a while, there was nothing they could do, whereas Lucas had direct access to Chris. That was definitely the reasoning for why Lucas and the other teens were viewed as sort of threats at the time. They were enablers who were doing things for their own laughs. Everyone at this time was very worried that there would be a next idea, guys. That Chris was so far gone and so, I don't think elusive is the right word. It would be more like naive, that Chris would fall for something like this again. And so anyone who was able to gain access to Chris without other people being there to sort of oversee it was deemed a threat. So the doxing of Lucas was something that a lot of people felt justified at the time, in order to sort of threaten them to get out of Chris's life. Apparently it wasn't the captain, it was Marvin, someone else in the guard dogs, another Kiwi Farms member. I can see why Lucas sort of wouldn't care about the distinction between these two, especially if the captain agreed with the doxing. Okay, back to the essay. As a side note, I wasn't a direct party to dealings of the guard dogs. I was told about things after the fact. I'm a Kiwi Farms member who often posted updates about Chris. When I first read the post on Chris's Twitter, I assumed in error that the Teen Squad had been infighting, and so created a Kiwi Farms thread titled 1225, The Teen Squad Reveals Themselves, Say They're Behind the Merge. I didn't find out until later what had actually happened. Later in December, content pertaining to Lucas's interaction with Chris was leaked on 8chan. The captain mentioned to me that Eva and Devil had both blocked Chris and that Lucas was the one leaking, based on matching headers from phone screenshots, including one confirmed to have been sent from Lucas beforehand. Editorial note, again, this is ancient drama in history. I really don't care about pointing fingers at this time. In a conversation from January 2019, the captain commented to me that dealing with Chris daily, even for 5 to 10 minutes, had been exhausting, and it was why he was beginning to pull back. Chris still maintained trust toward the captain, as seen by a mention in this DM Chris sent to Marvin on 30 January, which Marvin shared with me. I will get over it, but I did get an idea of one thing I may do later. I might log in on my laptop, reset my number of followers by blocking everyone. Then after that, I'll say, my account was compromised, and I lost all of my followers. Please refollow me, thank you. And I'll protect my account before allowing any new followers to come in. And I'll authorize you to log in, and sort out the legit from the bugbears. Yes, it's the perfect plan. Do not tell anyone, except Nolan Captain. I've work to hack into now. Editor's note, so it was around this time that one of the guard dogs posed as Magichan on Twitter. I believe that they're actually the one who doxed Lucas, so I guess that would have been Marvin. So these people having access to Chris's account fits perfectly with what we assumed was going on at the time. Contact between Chris and the captain continued being less frequent. By March 2019, the captain was checking in with Chris every 1 to 2 weeks and would update Marvin, Noel, and Love You Long Time if anything came up. He told me that month that he just got burned out on dealing with Chris, and that his role at that point was just to be around in case Chris needed to reach out to someone he trusted if more trolling was happening. By that point, Marvin was the lead in what was left of the guard dogs group. Also in March, Chris was penalized in the Therapeutic Docket Court Diversion Program. According to the captain, that was because Chris had missed too many required weekly meetings with the Boost support group. Chris thought he'd met the requirement, but he neglected to confirm it. The last time the captain and I chatted was in April 2019. I assume that he continued his distancing from Chris and eventually ceased communication with him. Lastly, I'll address some things Brian Frogboy and Jack Z have claimed about their interactions with the captain. At some point in mid-2018, Chris made an off-color joke about Brian and his girlfriend about joining their relationship. That caused Brian to start ignoring Chris, in the middle of talks about publishing Brian's prequel comment. The captain didn't want Chris to lose a potential income stream from prequel, so he intervened by facilitating contact between them again. So he reached out to Brian and said that Chris was in a bad situation, indirectly referencing the Idea Guy saga, that Chris was sorry for what he'd said, and that they need to talk it out because Chris would need the money. Brian later made a video where he discussed that stuff, but the captain told me that Brian misrepresented his words and made things sound more exaggerated than they were, and also that he hadn't explicitly mentioned the Idea Guys to Brian. Jack Z came up a few times during my conversations with the captain. He summed up Jack Z as someone who gave money to Chris and is afraid of Noel. In January 2020, Jack Z made a couple of Kiwi Farms threads about his own interactions with Chris. He had some contact with the captain as well. However, during the course of one thread, he began making claims about the captain's personal life being negatively affected by Chris, or that the captain was considering visiting Virginia to help Chris. I'm skeptical of those claims, because the captain never mentioned anything to me about them. Captain briefly mentioned his personal life to me on few occasions, but only to say he was doing well. That's the conclusion of the essay. We have little information about the person who published this other than, by their own admission, they're a Kiwi Farms member who was in contact with the captain in the late 2010s. There's nothing necessarily groundbreaking here, although I think that if in the future someone wanted to make a sort of chronological Geno Samuel type video with everything we know now, inserting this information into the Guard Dog saga would be some valuable insight. And this is not a tease that I'll be doing something like that. I'm literally saying that, I don't know, 20 years from now, if someone was trying to make a Chris Chan video, this should hopefully be inserted into that time period. I'm glad that after all these years, this kind of saga with the captain was finally put to a close. And I'm glad that you stuck around and watched this video. Please be nice to each other in the comments, consider supporting the creators you admire, never lose sight of the things that are important to you, and remember to zap to the extreme.